Hi, I'm so glad you joined me today. This is Karen with Karen's Cards and More. And today we're going to create this card. I started out when I planned this video and trying to decide what I was going to do. I wanted to do a card using a watercolor background where we could brush on the watercolor and have a neat background. And I wanted to show you that process. But in the process of creating this card, I ended up doing something that I wanted to really highlight in this video, and if you'll stay with me, I'll explain it in more detail, but I want to show you how to get more out of your dies than just the shape that it's created to be, how you can use them to create something different. So stick with me and we'll get to that in more detail. So let's talk about this card. This card features 3 of the new in colors. We're going to be using 3 of the new in colors. So let me show you those colors. We're going to be using Tahitian Tide. We're going to be using Orchid Oasis, and those 2 are going to be our watercolors that we're using. But then we're also going to be using Starry Sky, and Starry Sky is this color that we're accenting with. And so the inside of the card says some friendships are just meant to be. It's got a little bit of stamping there, some stamping on the outside. This is what we're going to create. The stamp set I used for this is the Shaded Summer. We're going to be using this floral here and Love You Friend on the front. Some friendships are just meant to be on the inside, and these little sprigs. So that's the stamp set. Then, because of what I was trying to accomplish, I needed to pull out a die set. There is a coordinating die set for Shaded Summer, but it didn't have anything that I wanted to use for my sentiment. So I pulled out my painted labels die, and it has this label and this decorative border. And that's what we're going to be using to create our portion for down here. Okay, we're also going to use the Stamparatus today because that's going to be the best way to put our floral image on the watercolor background, and I'll talk about that more in just a moment. So let's start with our watercolor piece. And for this, let me show you the card components. If you do not need to write these down, the card recipe as well as the products I'm using will all be on my blog, karenscardsandmore.com, and you'll be able to follow along there and see everything you need to have to do this card and get the dimensions and all that. So I started with a basic white card base that is 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4. And then I have a piece of the Starry Sky that is 4 by 5 1/4. Then I have a piece of the watercolor paper that is 3 3/4 by 5. Okay, so let's start with our watercolor piece. We're going to start with that. And I'm going to be using our brushes. They come in a set of 3, and you get this fan type brush along with a medium and a finer brush point like this. And these are made to, you put water in them and then you can push to get the water out. So let's get started on our components. The key to starting this procedure, I'm using the fanned brush, and the key to this is really to get a lot of water. If you don't put enough water, your color is, when we go to put our color on, it's not going to spread and give you the effect that you want. So the key to start with this is just to make sure you get plenty of water. And I'm just squeezing to get water down to the brush part And I want a lot of water on this. And this is why you have to use the watercolor paper, because of the amount of water that we're putting on. Now, when you go to put your watercolor down, if you are not getting enough movement, you can add more water, but that tells you, don't think that you're doing something wrong. You just need more water. So it really is key to get a lot of water. Now I'm going to start with the Tahitian Tide. So I'm going to open this up. And you could use the liquid or you can use the stamp pad. I'm just taking another block and just dabbing it on my ink pad. You do not want to put your water brush directly to your ink pad. Put it on a block. And then I'm just going to come in with this color and I'm just dabbing it on. And I didn't look for a certain design, or, you know, I wasn't trying to keep it in certain areas. I'm just letting the water move it. The more water, the better, actually, for this technique. And one thing you want to remember as you're doing this will dry a little bit lighter. So definitely keep that in mind. It won't be as dark. And so like I'm not getting the movement that I want. So I'm just going to come in and I'm going to add more water. Because that's really the key. It's all about the water. And then I'm going to just come in with some more color. And I am not taking a lot of care to go in a certain area. I just want a real haphazard look, maybe. Is that the right word that I'm trying to think of? So I'm just doing that. Now I'm going to just clean my brush. And I'm just going to squirt the water. And I want to make sure it's coming out clear. I'm going to close this for now. We're not done with it. We're going to be bringing that back. But I do want to just close it for now. Then we're going to, before we go in with our next color, we're going to need to bring in our heat gun. You can either leave this and let it dry naturally, or you can dry it with your heat gun. But you want this first color to be dry before you go to the next part. So I'm just going to bring in my heat gun and dry this first color. Okay, that's got my first color dry. And I'm just going to put some water on this block so I've got plenty of water to work with. And now I'm just going to come in with that fan brush again. And I'm going to get water over here where I want my next color. Now you could add more water and go back with the Tahitian Tide if you wanted more of that. But I'm just going to come in and get this ready for my next color. You definitely want to make sure in between to clean your brushes so you're not putting the same color already down in it, unless that's the look that you're going with. So I just want to make sure I get plenty of water. Okay, now I'm going to come in with Orchid Oasis. And I'm just bringing in another block and I'm doing the same thing. I'm just getting some color on my block. And I'm just going to do the same thing. See how this one's moving a lot more? That means I have a lot more water on my paper. And that's really key. I can't emphasize the water because that's really what makes it move. Now, if you've got plenty of water and you're getting good movement, you can always pick this up and let the ink run a little bit. And let it move around that way. I don't know if you can see how the ink is moving. And it just follows the water. Just like that. And I think I'm happy with that. So I'm going to just move this out of the way. I want to go ahead and clean my brushes so that the next time I want to use them, I don't have these colors in it. And I just keep squirting or dipping it in water until I get clear. I want it to be clear. Just like that. And then I'm just going to dry the second color. I like that. I think we've got a good mixture of color there. Now, it is very, very important that your watercolor piece is dry before you try to stamp on top of this. You will not get a good imprint if you don't make sure it's dry, whether you let it set to dry or whether you use your heat gun. This has got to be dry. So now I'm going to bring in my Stamparatus, and I like the Stamparatus because I know that it may not stamp as dark as I want it to on the first go, and I may have to repeat stamp it. So I want to make sure to use the Stamparatus so I can stamp back down in the exact same place. So I'm just getting this set up, bringing my magnets in. And then I'm coming in with my stamp and deciding where I want it. And I want it to go over both my colors. I think that looks pretty good. I want to give myself plenty of room down here for my basket or pot that my flowers are in. So I think that looks good. So I'm just going to close this to pick my stamp up. And I'm stamping this with the Starry Sky. So I'm just going to open this up. And hopefully this is all in the camera where you're seeing this. But I'm going to ink this up. And then I'm just going to close it. I'm going to bring in my tool to help me put some pressure on that. Now, if you still have water on your piece, this is not going to work. You have to make sure it's dry. I can't emphasize that enough. Okay, now see how it's not quite dark enough? I mean, unless that's the look you want, and then that's great, but I want it darker. So I'm just going to come in with some more ink. And you can repeat this as many times as you need to till you get your image to look the way you want. So I'm just going to come in again. And I think I'm going to go one more time. I especially want to make sure I get the big flower. And I like that. I think that's good. So we're definitely done with the Starry Sky. Oh, no, we're not. I said that too quick. I'm just going to set this aside. And we're going to go ahead and do our stamping on the inside of our card. So let me bring in our card base, and I'm just going to go ahead and fold this. So for the inside, I want to put, sometimes some friendships are just meant to be, I want that to be in the middle. So I'm going to stamp that, and I'm using the Starry Sky for this. So I'm just going to ink this up. And then I'm just going to stamp this in the middle. Just like that. And then I'm going to use the Tahitian Tide and the Orchid Oasis. So I'm going to get both of these ready. And I'm going to use the little sprig. And I'm going to go first with my Tahitian Tide. I'm just going to put one of these sprigs down of that. And then I'm just going to come back with the Orchid Oasis and do another one right beside it, just pulling these colors to the inside of the card. So that ties the front of the card to the inside. Okay, so we're done with all of these. And so the next thing that we need to talk about is our greeting for the outside. So we're just going to go ahead and put all this together, and then I'll show you what I did with that. So I'm going to bring in my Stampin' Seal. And I'm going to adhere my watercolor piece to my Starry Sky piece. And because this watercolor paper can get a little warped, I usually put a little extra in the middle. You could definitely use your liquid glue for this. So I'm going to bring this in. And I'm just going to try to center this up. Just like that. And now I'm going to put this on our card front. So again, I'm just going to put some Stampin' Seal on the back. And this is just going to go on the front, just like this. Okay. Now, out of the Starry Sky, I die cut the two pieces from the painted label that I showed you. But when I put this together, number one, my border piece is wider than this. I wanted to kind of look like a pot, and I didn't have a die cut or a stamp set that was a pot or a basket, so I was trying to use what I have. So I looked at this and I thought, I think I can make a pot out of this, but I wanted this to be as long, the border piece to be as long as my pot. So if you look towards where this is bubbled out, if I cut that to where that's the top, then this will fit right on there. So let me show you what I did. I'm just going to bring in my trimmer. And what I did, I put this in my trimmer so that the whitest part was on my track And then I just made sure that the top or the bottom was straight with one of the lines. So you can just pick a line to line it up with and make sure it's even. I'm just going to set that down and I'm just going to cut that top off. So what I was saying earlier, sometimes you can use your stamps to make a shape that you don't have. I didn't have a pot or a basket, but I could use this by cutting this off to make this flower pot. So take a look at your dies. You may be able to use some things that you have in a different way from how it's intended and still get a beautiful piece out of it. But then this is going to fit together perfectly, just like that. And it's going to give us the look of a basket. So now there's this other stamp in this Shaded Somerset, Love You Friend. And I just want to stamp this on here. And I'm going to do this in Versamark. And then emboss it with the white embossing powder. So I'm just going to bring in a piece of scrap paper, and it doesn't matter. You can see this is well loved. I've used it a lot. So I'm just going to bring in my piece that I want to emboss, and I'm going to bring in my embossing buddy, and I just want to get some of that on there to control my powder. And then I'm just going to ink this up. Now you could use your Stamparatus to do this as well, but for me this was just as easy to stamp. So I'm just going to try to get this in the middle of my pot, and I'm just going to stamp that down. Just like that. We're done with our Versamark. So I'm just going to come in with my embossing powder. And I like to go over it a couple times to make sure that I'm getting it all covered, and that looks good. Now, because this is such a tiny piece that I'm going to try to heat emboss, if you try to hold that with your fingers, chances are you're going to burn yourself. So what I like to do with my embossing supplies, I keep a clothespin. For just this purpose, I can snap my clothespin, and I've got a little spot there that I just want to pull off. I can use my clothespin to hold a portion of that. So I'm just going to come in with my heat gun and set our powder. Okay, and you'll know when it turns shiny, you'll know that it's ready. So I'm going to bring in my card, and I'm going to figure out where I want my pot first. I like it down there to cover up a little bit of the pooling of the ink on my, but then that's going to put me too far down. So I'm just going to have some of this coming down. So this is going to go up in here. Okay, so I'm just going to use liquid glue for this. And I'm just going to center that on there like that. And then I'm going to put liquid glue on the back of my other piece here. And I'm just going to do some dots of glue around these fancy edges to this. Not a whole lot, just a few little dots, and that'll certainly hold it. And then I'm just going to butt this up against my pot. Just like that. And push it down. And there we have a pot that we created out of dies that were designed for another use, but it was very easy to transform those, put them together and transform them into a pot. So I hope you'll take a look at your dies and see what other uses you might have instead of the original use. And I have to be honest here. I got the card done, and I wasn't sure how to put my sentiment on there, and I had different ideas. I was going to do a strip, and I just couldn't figure out what to do. And my husband said, you need a flower pot. And of course, his engineering brain. And I said, well, I don't have a flower pot die. And he said, well, get out the dies that you have that you think could be used. And so really, he helped me plan and determine, hey, what about this? So that's how I came up with my flower pot when I did not have a flower pot die. And the one final step to dress it up just a little bit is to we're going to add some of these Rhinestone Waves Basic Jewels. And these came in the Waves of Inspiration collection. If you didn't get that collection, you can use any of the rhinestone gems. I'm just going to use these since I have them. So I'm just going to add a few of these on here. Just like that. And there we have our card. I hope you'll give this a try. If you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Hit the notification bell. You'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Again, check out karenscardsandmore.com. That's my blog. You can find me on Facebook. I have a group and a page. And I hope you will craft with me again soon.